remember people that were not involved in the scene at all, coming to set that afternoon to see.
You're no longer allowed to act because you did that one so well that we can't see you as something else.
And I went back to them in 2009 and I said, please, I need you to clear my name.
You talked to him directly?
I spoke to JL when my dad died and my brother died, and I begged them. I said, I have a family. I need you to tell the world that this stuff didn't happen.
Try not to gasp when you see the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air cast today. From Will Smith's hidden financial desperation to Janet Hubert's career assassination.
Calling a black woman difficult in Hollywood is the kiss of death. It's the kiss of death, and it's hard enough being a dark-skinned black woman in this business. But I felt it was necessary for us to finally move forward.
And then Alfonso Ribeiro's silent resentment towards the show.
I have been typecasted to the point where it's almost impossible for people to see me doing something else.
This is the full breakdown of everything the cameras were never supposed to show. Before The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air ever aired, Will Smith wasn't planning on becoming a sitcom star. He had built his name in music as one half of DJ Jazzy Jeff and The Fresh Prince, a rap duo that had early success in the late 1980s. Their album, He's the DJ, I'm the Rapper, went triple platinum, and the pair won a Grammy for Best Rap Performance. Will was young, rich, and completely inexperienced with money. He spent heavily on cars, clothes, jewelry, and whatever else caught his eye. He didn't think about saving, and he definitely didn't think about taxes. By the time the IRS stepped in, he owed nearly $3 million in unpaid taxes. The IRS didn't waste time. They seized cars, furniture, and money. His lifestyle collapsed overnight. To make matters worse, his second album flopped and didn't generate enough income to recover.
So they came to get their money. And I didn't have it, so they took everything.
Really?
At just 21 years old, Will Smith was famous and completely broke. Around this time, he met Benny Medina, a music executive who had an idea for a sitcom based on his own life. Growing up in East LA and moving in with wealthy relatives in Beverly Hills, Quincy Jones got involved as a producer and helped fast-track the audition process. That lifeline came not from acting school, not from auditions, but from a chance meeting on the Arsenio Hall show. That's where Will met producer Benny Medina, who had a concept based loosely on his own life, a street-smart kid from the inner city moving in with wealthy relatives. Soon after, Quincy Jones, the legendary producer and industry giant, invited Will to audition at his mansion. In that room were NBC execs, managers, and production heads. Will had 10 minutes to memorize the script, and Quincy pushed him hard. "You've got to do it now," Quincy reportedly said. "You'll never be more ready than now." Will didn't even have much acting experience. He landed the role after a rushed audition at Quincy's house, which became the start of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. But here's the part most fans don't know. For the first 3 seasons of Fresh Prince, 70% of Will Smith's paychecks went straight to the IRS. Will may have looked like he was on top of the world, but the truth was different. He took the role out of desperation. This wasn't a typical acting gig for him. It was a way out of financial disaster. While millions of viewers saw a funny and confident young man playing a version of himself on screen, behind the scenes he was trying to recover from a personal and financial crisis. Will was digging himself out of a financial grave, and maybe that's why he worked so hard to protect the image that show gave him. The squeaky clean, wisecracking, lovable rebel. Because behind the jokes and the Air Jordans was a man being financially crushed and playing a role he didn't even want at first. The Fresh Prince wasn't just a launch pad for Will Smith's acting career. It was a financial lifeline. And while the audience laughed at the jokes and loved the music and family themes, the truth was that Will Smith showed up to work every day, knowing that most of his paycheck wouldn't even make it to his pocket. that reality shaped everything that followed. Tatyana Ali, who played Ashley Banks, was only 11 years old when she joined the cast. For her, the set was a place of both opportunity and intense pressure. She would later recall that even at her young age, she could sense the adult issues happening around her. The show may have looked like a happy family on screen, but people like Tatyana were observing things they didn't fully understand at the time. Looking back, she described the environment as supportive in some ways, but very serious in others, especially because so much was riding on the show's success. She didn't know Will's full situation back then, but the signs were there. He was driven, constantly working, and focused on doing whatever it took to make the show succeed. Meanwhile, Tatyana Ali had one of her most awkward moments on set during a very important part of her life. Her first real kiss. What was supposed to be a sweet and private moment for her quickly became a moment she wished she could forget. All thanks to her co-stars and the pressure of being in front of the cameras. In a 2018 interview with Us Weekly, Tatyana Ali shared how this special moment went from bad to worse.
To remember everybody, people that were not involved in the scene at all, coming to set that afternoon to see.
Oh no!
And I just remember Karen Parsons, who played Hillary Banks, Karen, Alfonso, just like, and you know, we had the cameras.
Allfonso Ribeiro and Karen Parsons, who played her on-screen siblings Carlton and Hillary Banks, decided to show up on set that day. Their presence made things even more nerve-wracking. They weren't supposed to be there, and Tatyana wasn't expecting them to watch such an intimate scene.
Sitcoms are like huge cameras. And I just remember them like looking behind the camera like, and now it's like a you know.
Sure, now it's funny.
I mean, who has a first kiss like that?
Right.
At the time, I wanted to kill. I wanted to die.
But over time, she was able to move on from that embarrassing experience. By 2013, Tatyana was more open about discussing relationships and her personal experiences. Even though her first on-set kiss was a disaster, Tatyana Ali grew from the experience. Over the years, she has become more comfortable in her own skin and learned to laugh about the awkward moments in life. She's no longer the shy, young Ashley Banks we saw on TV, but a strong, confident woman who can look back on these memories with grace and humor. These revelations from Tatyana show just how much pressure everyone was under during the show's run, and how even the youngest cast member was affected by the adult tensions surrounding the production. For a lot of the Fresh Prince cast, stepping away from the show meant stepping into new opportunities. But for Allfonso Ribeiro, it didn't go that way. After years of playing Carlton Banks, the lovable, dorky cousin with the sweater vests and the iconic dance, he quickly realized that the role that made him famous was also the one keeping him stuck. Like Will Smith, Alfonso had become a household name. But unlike Will, he didn't get movie offers or big-name roles after the show ended. Hollywood didn't want to see him do anything new. They just wanted more Carlton. And that became a real problem.
Imagine for a second, you did something. People loved it. People thought it was fantastic. They think of you doing it. They can't think any other way. It was perfect.
When Will Smith dropped his blockbuster memoir, Will, fans expected supportive reposts and inside jokes from his longtime co-star and on-screen cousin, Alfonso Ribeiro. What they got instead was silence. In an interview with Extra, Alfonso carefully distanced himself from the hype. Insiders said this wasn't about being busy. It was about resentment. Alfonso, they say, felt blindsided by the way Will framed certain Fresh Prince-era moments. And with all the personal revelations about his marriage and career in that book, maybe Alfonso felt like Will dragged him into a spotlight he didn't ask for. The silence didn't stop there. When Will Smith slapped Chris Rock at the 2022 Oscars, the world froze. Hollywood flooded social media with hot takes, but Alfonso said nothing. No tweet, no interview, no reaction. And people noticed. According to sources close to the set, Alfonso didn't just avoid the press, he deliberately distanced himself from Will's PR mess. It was damage control by omission, because for Alfonso, being associated with Will Smith's scandals, from the slap to the entanglement drama, was now more of a liability than a legacy. Alfonso has said straight up that playing Carlton basically ended his acting career. After Fresh Prince, Alfonso quietly moved away from acting and leaned into hosting. He directed a few episodes of Young and Hungry and KC Undercover, but his main focus became family-friendly hosting gigs. These days, most people recognize him from America's Funniest Home Videos and Dancing with the Stars. Hosting gave him a clean break from Carlton, and a career where people could finally see him as himself. He didn't just say this quietly in interviews either. He brought that same energy to social media. When someone on X suggested that Tyler Perry should revamp his career, Alfonso fired back with one sentence that shook the timeline. "I don't need or ever want that man to do anything for me." It was cold, direct, and very unexpected. And of course, the internet went wild. Whether it's a personal issue, professional disagreement, or something deeper, Alfonso's not interested in certain Hollywood connections. Meanwhile, the gap between Will and Alfonso only grew over the years. Some say jealousy was inevitable. He didn't show up for Will's bungee jump special, didn't comment on his Oscar win. And during the 2020 Fresh Prince reunion, fans noticed Alfonso skipped the emotional segment between Will and Janet Hubert. A segment about healing. A moment meant to restore bonds. He wasn't there. That kind of disparity doesn't just sting, it defines you. While Will's fame diversified, rapper, actor, producer, public figure, Alfonso found himself hosting game shows and reality TV. There's nothing wrong with that, but the contrast was glaring. Maybe it's not about jealousy. Maybe it's about erasure. About how one man's rise became another man's glass ceiling. Because every time someone says, "Oh, you're Carlton," what they're really saying is, "We don't see you as anything else." And that kind of invisibility is a hard thing to live with. Janet Louise Hubert arrived in Hollywood with everything the entertainment industry claimed to want. Classically trained at Juilliard, seasoned on Broadway, with the kind of dramatic range that could anchor any production. She wasn't another struggling actress hoping for her big break. She was a proven professional ready for stardom. When she landed the role of Vivian Banks in 1990, everything seemed perfect. The show was groundbreaking, a family sitcom centered on Black excellence rather than Black struggle. Uncle Phil wasn't a stereotype, but a successful federal judge. Aunt Viv wasn't a caricature, but an educated, articulate woman with her own ambitions and complexity.
That does it. I'm getting me a white man.
Hubert brought something special to Vivian Banks that the character desperately needed. She wasn't playing the typical TV mom who existed solely to support other characters' storylines. Her Aunt Viv was fierce, intellectual, and uncompromising. She could deliver comedy with perfect timing, then shift into dramatic territory that elevated the entire production. But behind the scenes, tensions were building that would eventually explode into one of television's most destructive feuds. One of the biggest turning points came at the end of season 3, when the original Aunt Vivian was suddenly replaced. Her departure sparked confusion among fans. Without warning or explanation, Hubert was gone, and Daphne Maxwell Reid stepped into the role. Janet Hubert was a classically trained actress who brought strength, elegance, and presence to the role of Aunt Viv. But according to Hubert, her time on the show became unbearable due to tensions with Will. In multiple interviews, including a 1993 feature with Jet magazine, she accused Will Smith of using his influence to push her off the show. Hubert described the set environment as toxic. She said she was labeled as difficult because she spoke up about unfair treatment and resisted being pushed into the background. In her view, the show had become centered entirely around Will's stardom, leaving little room for the rest of the cast to shine. Her contract negotiations also became a point of conflict. According to her, she was offered a renewal deal that significantly reduced her pay and restricted her from taking other work. Already pregnant at the time, Hubert said the offer felt like a setup, and she ultimately refused to sign it. That's when she was replaced. On the other side, Will Smith publicly claimed that Hubert was hard to work with and brought tension to the set. In a 1994 radio interview, he said she wanted the show to revolve around her character and made things difficult for everyone. He even went as far as referring to her as the Antichrist of their working relationship, a harsh label that deeply hurt Hubert and stayed with her for decades. What followed was a systematic character assassination campaign designed to destroy Hubert's reputation and ensure she'd never have the power to challenge the entertainment industry again. Will Smith fired the first shot in what would become a 27-year war. Rather than simply moving forward with the new cast, he chose to publicly attack his former co-star's character and professionalism. Alfonso Ribeiro joined the attack with even more vicious language. In college appearances and stand-up sets, he described Hubert as mentally unstable and unprofessional, using terms that were both sexist and potentially defamatory. The campaign worked exactly as intended. In Hollywood, being labeled difficult is career suicide, especially for Black women who already face additional barriers to employment. The fallout nearly destroyed Hubert's career. For a long time, she couldn't find steady work in television, and the industry labeled her as problematic.
And I went back to them in 2009 and I said, please, I need you to clear my name.
You talked to him directly?
I spoke to JL when my dad died and my brother died, and I begged them. I said, I have a family. I need you to tell the world that this stuff didn't happen.
The personal cost for Hubert was devastating. She found herself blacklisted from television and film opportunities. The woman who had once commanded Broadway stages and television sets was reduced to questioning her own worth and sanity. Hubert later revealed that she experienced suicidal thoughts during this period, feeling so broken and isolated that she considered ending her life. The most insidious aspect of this character assassination was how it became accepted truth within the entertainment industry. People who had never worked with Hubert began repeating the narrative that she was difficult and unprofessional. Her destruction served as a warning to other performers. Accept what you're given, stay in your assigned role, or face complete professional annihilation. For years afterward, the entertainment industry pointed to Janet Hubert as an example of what not to do, how not to behave, what happens when you think you're bigger than the machine. Will Smith's entire career may have started from desperation, but it was held together by something even more complex: pain. The kind you don't talk about, the kind you bury under a smile, a punchline, or a box office role. And nowhere is that pain more obvious than in the single most iconic scene from The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. It comes in the episode, Papa's Got a Brand New Excuse. Will's father, Lou, re-enters his life after years of abandonment, only to disappear again. And in the final scene, when Will breaks down in Uncle Phil's arms, the world stood still. Fans cried, critics praised the acting. But what they didn't realize was that Will wasn't acting.
How come you don't want me, man?
That moment wasn't on the page. It came from Will's own life. Years later, in interviews, he admitted that scene tapped into his own childhood trauma. The years of growing up with an abusive father, the memory of watching his dad hit his mother, and the unresolved anger he carried into adulthood. The show had always played up the contrast between West Philly and Bel-Air. But for Will, that storyline wasn't just part of the script, it was real. He grew up in a house where violence wasn't a punchline. Over the years, Will has opened up in interviews about the abuse he witnessed at home, especially the night he saw his father hit his mother so hard, she collapsed. He was just 9 years old. That moment stayed with him for decades. And whether he realized it at the time or not, it shaped how he approached everything, from relationships to fame, and even his obsession with being seen as perfect. During the height of The Fresh Prince, Will buried himself in work. Every opportunity, every role, every public appearance was part of a bigger goal: prove he could rise above where he came from. To the outside world, he was winning. But behind that smile was someone who never really stopped running from what he saw as a child. In 2019, on The Graham Norton Show, and later on Red Table Talk, Will talked openly about the fear and shame that shaped his worldview. "I watched my father punch my mother in the face," he said, "and I won't create a space like that in my home." But here's the tragic irony. While Will was determined not to repeat his father's violence, he did inherit something else: silence, suppression, the performance of strength, and that need to protect the brand, to keep everything controlled and shiny, became his undoing. That fatherless breakdown scene has since become a meme, a monologue, a performance masterclass. But for Will Smith, it was a warning sign. It was the first public crack in a mask he would spend decades trying to hold in place. Even with all that vulnerability, Will still had his critics. Some of his co-stars felt he had become too big, too fast. They said he acted like the set revolved around him. And in some ways, it did. As his film career took off, the cast noticed a shift. He wasn't just the funny kid from Philly anymore. He was a brand, a machine. And not everyone was okay with that. So, after all these years of reruns, nostalgia, and that catchy theme song, it turns out The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air was never just a feel-good sitcom. It was a pressure cooker, filled with fame, secrets, personal pain, and power plays. Will Smith was the face of a generation, but behind that smile was a man running from his past, managing a public image that's now crumbling in real time. And while most people laughed at Carlton's dance or cried during that one powerful scene, the cast, especially Janet, Alfonso, and Tatyana, were quietly living through something much more serious. Careers were damaged, relationships were destroyed, and some of those wounds are only now starting to heal. The truth is finally coming out, and now that the actors have spoken, it confirms what many already feared. The show that felt like family may have been built on silence, sacrifice, and pain. Anyway, that's it for this video, folks. Bye.